I'm Alice Park, Senior Correspondent for TIME, and I'm joined by lecturer and activist Rachel Cargle. Rachel, thank you so much for joining us on TIME100 Talks.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
So we're going to be discussing a bunch of things today, but I wanted to start with this one. The pandemic has really transformed our lives in so many ways, not the least of which is how much time we spend online now. And we're having this conversation virtually, for example. But you've been online well before COVID-19 and really taking advantage of the digital medium and the digital community. As a lecturer and academic, your classroom isn't always a traditional one, but a digital one. How did your work as a teacher on social media begin?
Well, my work as a teacher basically started with my more intensive work as a student. There was so much that I was learning as I began to explore this intersection of my race and my womanhood, looking at the ways that I, as a Black woman, my placement within the feminist movement. And the more and more I learned after the original march that happened in 2017, the more and more I saw and was more critical about what I was seeing happening within the feminist movement, the more I wanted to share what I was learning. I was trying to see what are the racial histories of the feminist movement? What is the involvement of people of color as leaders, as participants in this movement? And so as I began to watch my own lectures, read my own books, be more intensive in how I was learning, I just started to share out loud what I was learning, and people joined me in that. So that's kind of how it started. I wanted to have a community to learn along with, and they all became students with me as we move through trying to get a better understanding.
So as you said, as you were sharing your experiences, more people kind of found you and started to follow you. That's one of, I think, the organic ways that digital communities start to grow and can be very powerful. But as we know, it's always a double-edged sword, right?
Absolutely. That's the magic of social media, really, is that we have this opportunity to be in community with people that we never would have been able to meet in real life in previous years. And it can be so pointed and focused on exactly what our personal interests are or our personal insight is. And so in particular, I have been able to find a community of people who are willing to unlearn and reimagine what it is we understand. And I don't think I would have had the type of boldness in exploring this if I wouldn't have known that I was surrounded by other people who were also going through that unlearning journey. And it's really incredible the mental clarity that comes when you realize you're not the only one who's experiencing something, or you're not the only one who's feeling a particular way. And so I think social media has this wildly unique ability to bring people together and to give them validation of what their experiences are, what their realities are, what their lens is, with people from all over the world. So that's absolutely one of the best parts, that you're able to be in community and conversation with others that you would have never had the opportunity to connect with in person in previous times. As far as the negative aspect of it, there's a lot of very hard conversations around what I talk about on my page, looking at people who are reluctant to explore what their role might be in white supremacy, who are reluctant to acknowledge that they might have a privilege in one way or another and are expected to show up to fight for those people who are oppressed under the spaces they exist in. And so oftentimes I get a lot of pushback from people who are either very angered by the conversation and they don't feel like exploring those topics, who feel like my pursuit of justice is an attack against their own personal livelihoods, or who simply sit with these feelings that aren't, that they never had to come up against before, and social media has kind of placed it directly in front of them. And so there's a lot of negative comments, a lot of DMs that I get from people who are angry or frustrated at the way I do my work, and that's just par for the course of being visible to in public spaces.
How can social media become a safe place for people, to share and support and educate as you've been doing with your community? Are there things that you have found that help to nurture that aspect of it versus the more negative parts?
Well, I think one of the biggest things is that as you're approaching this conversation, especially when it comes in a learning space, just to have your tools ready. What sources are you citing? What books can you put people back to? What documentaries can you suggest that they listen to? Because, I'm not the all in all expert of the things that I'm teaching. I'm someone who has learned and is simply sharing. And so I always make it a priority to make sure that I tap back and, offer who I'm learning from so people can go on and learn themselves. I think one of the hallmarks of a quality teacher, in my opinion, is not just giving information, but teaching people how to learn themselves and teaching people how to think more critically. So I think that a few of the things that absolutely should be considered is recognizing that if you are an expert, you're only an expert because of all the people you've learned from. And it's so wonderful to be able to give people other options of who they could be learning from, because someone else's language might be more clear to them. Someone else's approach might be a little more easy for them to understand or engage with. And so I think as someone who is very visible on social media, I like to have my toolbox of resources for people to pull from outside of me, so they know that my work isn't an opinion piece. It's not just me trying to get people to feel a particular way about how I feel, but there's lots of science I can cite. There's lots of people who have done research that I can point them to, and that our learning starts with the conversation, but it moves much further into gathering knowledge, developing empathy, and taking action.
And as you said, some of the issues that you address, racism, social injustice, white supremacy, are really tough and very complex issues. And, there's a lot of hurt and pain involved as well. And I'm sure you found in your community that the support that's needed is also very important. So did you see kind of a growing need for support in the mental health area that you wanted to focus on, and how did you recognize that and make sure that was being addressed as well?
Yeah, I to speak for myself, it was very clear that the ongoing constantly coming up against the deep negativity, against just the basic meanness of people, against the dismissal of my realities, the dismissal of these systems that are painful. It was a very real weathering of my mental health in feeling like I was constantly being gaslighted about how me and other people in the Black community were experiencing the world. And so this concept of weathering, which is one that I suggest everyone really go do some research into, because it's not only this grind up against your mental health, but also physically. Black people are having physical reactions to the ongoing microaggressions and macroaggressions that we're experiencing in the world based on our racialized bodies. And so I think that it was very clear to me that if I was to continue in this work, it would absolutely have to include some type of intensive self-care. And I knew that if I was experiencing it, then so many other Black women were, maybe in even more intense ways. I often say that people who come into my comment section and they say, "Oh my gosh, Rachel, I'm so sorry all these people were saying such mean and degrading things to you." And I say, "Thank you. I appreciate you having that empathy, but recognize that what you're seeing people say to me online is also what the Black people in your office are hearing in different spaces, are also the things that the Black parents at your school are coming up against. So this isn't a racial issue. It's a thing that people need to see reflected in a lot of spaces of society." And so I wanted to be able to show up in the ways that I could along the lines of mental health. And so I started my own foundation called the Loveland Foundation, where we're able to pour into Black women and girls and support them in their mental health journey.
Yeah, and on your homepage for the Loveland Foundation, the motto is, "We are becoming the ones we've been waiting for." And I think that's so powerful and holds a lot of meaning. Can you tell us what, in your view, has been missing? How is the foundation aiming to fulfill that need, especially, as you said, among communities of color, and especially women that you are focusing on?
Yeah, well, that's a quote from the brilliant author Alice Walker. And when I first heard the quote, I felt the same way as you. It felt very powerful in considering how we play into how we continue to care for ourselves and survive in this world. And so when I started the Loveland Foundation, it was at first just a birthday fundraiser that I did on my Instagram page about 2 years ago, when I only had probably 10K followers. And so it was just a small fundraiser where I had gone to a therapy session myself that day. And I said, wow, everyone deserves to have this opportunity to get clarity and to be heard. And Black women need this as the foundations of their community. I think there could be a ripple effect from this particular community if I could serve them, knowing that they're often the bedrock of their homes, their churches, their communities, in so many spaces. So when I was trying to figure out how I could have the biggest impact, I figured I could start with Black women and girls. And it became this opportunity for everyone in my community to pour in and invest in the ways that they were showing up for the Black community, and particularly for the Black women and girls that they had been learning so much about through the work and the studying that I was doing. And looking at the phrase, "we are the ones we've been waiting for," I think one of the most exciting things about the Loveland Foundation is that it's all this crowdsourced donations. It's a lot of pushing on social media. It's a lot of people doing individual fundraisers, yoga studios having classes where donations are given to the Loveland Foundation, clothing lines donating the proceeds. And I think, considering the term "we are the ones we've been waiting for," it really speaks to the community-minded contributions that come into the Loveland Foundation. It's all of the community, us. We're not waiting for the government to hopefully start caring. We're not waiting for a particular institution to hopefully start caring. We all saw a need, and I was able to come up with a framework, and we all really poured in and became the ones we were waiting for to really take care of Black women and girls in the way that they deserved.
Can you tell us about some of the examples of ways that you've seen that community through the Loveland Foundation do that and help support each other really, and find ways to self-care and provide, as you said, what's missing and what they can't find elsewhere?
Yeah, one of my favorite aspects of the Loveland Foundation is the ways that it's kind of a win-win, where we both are able to get Black women and girls free access to therapy, but also we have partnered with many listservs of Black and queer therapists that will be an option to serve that community. So we're able to both get these Black women and girls the therapy they deserve with a therapist that can really reflect the way that they walk through the world, being a Black woman, being a Black queer person. And then also we're getting these Black therapists who are such a low percentage in the field of therapy. We're able to get them clientele, and to get them paid, we pay them through our voucher program. And so it's been so awesome to meet the therapists who are working with these women and girls, because they are saying, "Rachel, I put the Therapy Fund website on my page, and now anyone who comes through me that's a Black woman or girl, I encourage them to get the therapy that they need for free." And so seeing that symbiotic relationship between the girls who need therapy and the Black therapists who are cheering them on, and how they're constantly trying to fuel each other to say, who else can I get to make sure they get the therapy they need, and how can we support our therapists in growing their presence within the therapy field.
That's such a powerful way it sounds like the beginnings of something bigger too, right? Do you have plans or a vision for expanding the program or speaking with other groups to include more people and hopefully use this as a model?
We're definitely looking at ways to expand. And one of the biggest things that has been on my heart is being in much more support of the therapists who are part of our network. And one of the ways that we've been doing it, we've been offering them free training sessions in other areas of therapy with institutions who do these trainings, who have come up and said, "We want to support the Black therapists who are part of your programming. How can we do that?" And they're able to get these trainings that would usually cost a lot of money, and they might not be able to pursue it, and really supporting the therapist and building their craft so that they can really show up for the people that are coming to them, both through our program and outside of our program, any of the clients that they're serving. And as I've been doing this work, it's really become so evident how one of the biggest issues here is that there's not enough Black therapists in the field. And so I'm hoping that our work will start to continue to push to grow that space as well.
And when you began, as you said, you started by sharing your experiences and your insights. Did you ever envision that you would be where you are today and have built the community that you built today? And in addition to that, where do you see this community going 5, 10 years from now?
Oh, absolutely not. I was so naive as to what could have been possible. I was kind of just walking through the world like, what can I do and how could I do it? I didn't have any particular plan, but I was willing to try and see what was possible. And I think that willingness to see what was possible is what propelled me into being vulnerable and saying, I have an idea, who's in it to help us see how we can invest in this particular community. And so I am completely blown away by the support that the Loveland Foundation has gained, by the how much the community has grown on my personal platforms, and the ways that learning along with me propels people into taking really meaningful action. And I can only hope that people continue to be critical in how they're experiencing the world, be critical in how they're engaging with each other, and for all of that knowledge to really push people into being more empathetic and actionable towards how we're showing up for each other.
I think that's such an important point for all of us to remember, and it's a great way to really educate, as you found. Rachel, thank you so much for sharing your perspectives and experiences with us. It was such a pleasure having you on Time 100 Talks.
Thank you so, so much.